Putin can't be really accounted for in terms of American imperialism. Neither can Erdogan, neither can Modi, and neither can, yes, the police state that will remain in China no matter who is the head of the Chinese Communist Party. A major reason for the lack of interest in the capitalist world state is the focus on so-called imperialism. Thus, on a podcast appearance of Gabriel Rockhill with Daniel Tutt, we were told very earnestly recently that the principal struggle today needs to be anti-imperialist, and the principal form that the class struggle has taken in our time is the struggle between nations, adding, most improbably, that this is to be understood as a global struggle for national self-determination. It sounds like we're still in World War I or in the post-World War II period. Tutt dutifully displays his Free Gaza poster in the video background, and the suggestion is made that now, at the end of the millennial left, the pro-Palestinian encampment protests on college campuses are poised to galvanize the rebirth of an organized communist or socialist politics in the West. Needless to say, such illusions are comforting in the face of the total wreckage of the recent elections. The wreckage of their illusions, I should add, not mine, about which most have nothing to say, even as they nervously sift through poll numbers and exit polls like everyone else. Still, this much is certain. The self-professed anti-imperialist left, the so-called Marxist-Leninists, are enjoying a bit of schadenfreude at the expense of the Jacobin crowd, given that the Harris campaign made it plain that the post-Sanders project of leftists working within the Democratic Party is an unmitigated failure. So we're watching a rerun of a remake. Even the young who weren't there know it's likely to end in abject political prostration for decades, even if that looks like excess nervous energy shooting back and forth across the internet for years. No one can say for certain, of course, but clearly today's anti-imperialism seems intent on guaranteeing that nothing built to last, nothing that might ever actually lead to a project for world socialism is erected or so much as advanced in our time. Indeed, the left seems intent on snuffing out what little potential might exist. The Marxism of Marx, Engels, and the Second International Radicals has no purchase today. It couldn't possibly. Within the mass movement for socialism that gripped the core capitalist countries in the second half of the long 19th century until roughly a century ago, it was the most prominent critical current. But since that time, the mass movement for socialism has collapsed, morphing into various political props of the capitalist world state. That is, the parties and political forces that lay claim to the legacy of Marx have helped to administer capitalism, whether as the Communist Party of the US supporting FDR in the 1930s and 40s, or the French Communist Party backing de Gaulle, or as indeed the Social Democratic Party in Germany, or in any of a dozen other examples, including communist countries over decades. No matter what one says about those regimes, much less military hostility towards them politically. So what I'm talking about here is that even the communist countries have had to participate in the administering of capitalism in the 20th century. And by the way, I recently saw a conversation between Daniel Tutt and Derek Varn, and they act like my accusation of Stalinism makes no sense. That's what I'm talking about here, right? And what Stalinism is the liquidation of Marxism in the name of Marxism. That's what it is. It's the legacy of revisionism from the old revisionist dispute. right? It's Marxism coming to take on the administration of capitalism itself. Socialism coming to be the greatest obstacle to socialism. That's what Stalinism is. It's not an empty accusation. It's not even really about Joseph Stalin and his policies. It's about the fate of international communism. So today, in the 100th anniversary year of Stalin's consolidation of his power, the Marxism of Marx and revolutionary Marxism is dead and buried, and with it is buried socialism. Now we have only lies, falsifications, ghosts, like Hamlet's ghosts, that haunt the world because lies and falsifications prevail. And anti-imperialism is one of those lies. Its claim to inherit the mantle of Marxism is laughably misguided. Lenin, in 1916, called the capitalist world imperialist to emphasize that capitalism had reached its highest stage, that it was ripe, as the Great War exposed, overripe for revolution. Imperialism was crucially a domestic European phenomenon, arising as it did from the cesspools of society's disintegration, from its lumpenization. Imperialism managed the contradiction of society's freedom with itself, and as such, it expressed the necessity of the dictatorship of the proletariat emanating from Europe and North America across the world. It expressed the necessity of a Eurocentric, yes, a Eurocentric global socialist revolution. Imperialism in 1916 was at its highest stage. It had prevailed ever since the defeat of the Revolution of 1848, but had since come into its own precisely as a revolutionary situation. This was Lenin's point. Lenin traced this in his follow-up in 1917 to Imperialism, State, and Revolution, which is precisely about the necessity of the overthrow of the imperialist state and the meeting of that necessity expressed by the imperialist state by revolutionary means, by the dictatorship of the proletariat. When, after the defeat of the European Revolution, the Comintern oriented towards nationalist movements led by Gandhi and Sun Yat-sen, they weren't identifying the primary contradiction, much less abandoning the project of building and rebuilding mass parties for socialism in the core of capitalism, or indeed anything of the sort. There was no reorientation towards the colonies. Indeed, Lenin made clear that his strategy was one of retreat, and that it was in that context that orientation towards the obviously radical struggles taking place in China and in India could play a part. But that it was an era of retreat is made clear in Lenin's masterpiece, or at least his final masterpiece, Left-Wing Communism and Infantile Disorder, written in 1920, the same year that he collaborated in the drafting of the National and Colonial Theses at the Second Congress of the Comintern. None of this was unclear at the time. The Comintern was identifying important tactical opportunities within a strategy of retreat in what remained an overall strategy of Eurocentric, which is to say capital-centric revolution. Those were serious revolutionaries who hoped to live to fight another day, and to do so on a world scale on the basis of the historical experience of 1917 to 1919. Today, what leftists call imperialism expresses only a faint desire to retreat to a pre-modern or even pre-human past. For them, history is simply to be resisted. I will add, you can see this when people like complain about like Columbus Day or something, right? They just wish that none of it had happened.